jump into that now. So this is part of a course called the Professional Scrum Foundations course, which is offered by Scrum.org. So I'm a trainer with Scrum.org, and this is the organisation that was founded by Keith Schwaber, who came up with Scrum. So they offer a number of different courses for different roles within Scrum, and this is really their basic overview course. It's a 2-day course on sort of how to get started with Scrum, how to learn the terminology and the origins, and this is a part of that course. So this is the official definition. Couple of keywords here. Scrum is a framework. So people talk about methodology, which may be a word you're familiar with. And really the difference between Scrum and a methodology. So some organizations use Prince2 or very heavyweight project management processes. And a methodology tends to be very, very prescriptive, but very strict. Do this, and this should happen. Do that, and this should happen. And you sort of follow along each step. So a framework like Scrum isn't so prescriptive. There are lots and lots of gaps that you've got to fill in for yourself. The idea behind that is the same technique is not going to work at every organisation. Every company is different. If you prescribe things to the lowest level of detail, it's not going to work for everybody. So there's lots of gaps, and the idea is to fill in the gaps with what works for you. So it's a framework to address complex problems. So it's this container we can put around complexity in order for us to hopefully achieve successful outcomes, deliver our products at the highest possible value. So value-driven are often words people use to talk about agile processes like Scrum. Value-driven development. We're looking to deliver the highest value first and stop at some point when there's not enough value left in the requirements to warrant carrying on. So there's a document up on the Scrum.org website, which if you're interested in Scrum, I'd encourage you to go and check out. It's called the Scrum Guide. It's about 12 pages now, I think. And it's the rules of Scrum. So within 12 pages, instead of having to read books and books and books, go and check out this document, and that's going to tell you all the rules that Scrum is. So it's pretty simple, 12 pages. You know, there are lots of big books about CMMI or Prince2 or alternatives. So it's very simple to understand. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to get it right. So the rules are easy, but the actual implementation tends to be really difficult. So people talk about things like chess. Chess is quite easy to learn. You can learn the rules in a couple of days. The rule book's probably only about the same, like maybe 15, 20 pages. Really difficult to be good at chess though. Months and months and years of practice. So it's a simple game, but incredibly hard to master. And Scrum and a lot of the other agile processes are similar. They're really easy to get started and follow the rules, but to obtain the right value for your organisation can be really difficult. So if I'm speaking too fast, just raise your hand or shout at me to slow down. So I just wanted to take you through a quick pass of what are the basics inside Scrum. And it's kind of broken down into these 3 categories. What are the roles? What are the things we actually deliver? So what are the artifacts? And then what are the events or meetings that are important inside Scrum? So what's really the purpose of these roles, artifacts, and events? So we end up with these 3 roles. I'm just going to push all this through because I hate slides to do this. There we go. We've got our 3 roles in the top left-hand corner. Our product owner, and this is the voice of the customer. Who is it who's acting on behalf of the stakeholders? Who's acting on behalf of the people that are paying money for this? So the product owner is our voice of the customer. They're the person who will prioritise the work that needs to be done. Our development team who are going to implement it, and the Scrum Master who's there primarily to look after Scrum. They're there to make sure that the team is being true to their process. So the product owner has this product backlog. Right, so underneath that product owner, and I'll explain why it looks like a pig in a minute, is our product backlog. This is our ordered list of requirements, and it's ordered on value. What is the most important thing to deliver next. So they own that. The development team takes those ordered requirements, takes the top priority, the highest value, and breaks them down into smaller pieces. These are often in tasks and make up that sprint backlog. So what are we going to do next, and how are we going to do it? The product backlog gives us the what our customer wants. The sprint backlog gives us how we're going to do it. So there's a clear difference of ownership. Product owner owns that what, the statement of requirements, and the development team owns the how. How are we going to do it? And they go through these events. So they go through the sprint planning meeting, which is where we take those highest pieces off the product backlog and turn them into tasks for the sprint backlog. We go through a sprint. A sprint is just a timeline. Start date and end date. Most Scrum teams typically work off 2 weeks in a day. So we deliver value working software every 2 weeks. Inside that is this daily Scrum, which is probably the piece of Scrum everybody knows. This daily stand-up meeting to go through progress. Coming out of the sprint, we have the sprint review. So showing the stakeholders and the product owners what has been completed. Finally into this retrospective, which is what did we do well, what do we want to change, what do we want to try next time? How do we keep continuous improvement going throughout our build process? So rather than wait till the end of the project, when typically you often have these, okay, what can we learn from this project? And we write it all up, shut it away in a drawer somewhere and no one looks at it. And Scrum is continuous, so trying to get better all the time. So our 3 roles. Accountability works top to bottom. So the idea here is each role can fire the one below it. If I'm a product owner, I can get a new development team if I like. If I'm a development team, I can get a new Scrum Master if I like. So there's often this misconception that Scrum Master is kind of the boss of the team. Actually the other way around. The Scrum Master is there to serve the team. So the team don't like the way that they're being served by the Scrum Master, find another one. And this is where the pig comes from. So you remember our product owner looked like a pig? This idea of pigs and chickens. So the pig doesn't want to open a restaurant with the chicken called ham and eggs. Someone in that relationship is committed and someone is just involved. So the idea with Scrum is everyone on the development team is committed. Everyone else is involved. So if you're on the development team, if you're the product owner, if you're the Scrum Master, you are committed because you're part of that delivery effort. If you're somebody's line manager, you're the testing manager, you're involved. So you're a stakeholder, but you're not part of that core team. And they differentiate the roles this way. So other examples of who might be chickens and who might be pigs. So our product owner, again, is the voice of the customer, the person that holds the budget. First and foremost, they're trying to optimize the value of the product, the return on investment. That really is the reason for their role. And the way they do that is choosing what the development team is going to build next. So you think about a traditional build. We get all our requirements together, we all agree on those requirements, and typically we have some kind of sign-off process, and then that's locked. We try then and manage scope from that point. If you want to change, we have a change control process. You estimate based on the change, and we redo the budget. So Scrum kind of turns it on its head. It says, well, actually not all requirements are equal. So why should we try and deliver all of them? Why would we want to analyze all of them, develop all of them, and then test all of them? Take the highest value ones, put those right through that process, take the next one, take the next one. So we're incrementally delivering feature by feature. And at any time then your customer can say, stop, I've spent enough money. Or I want to put my money somewhere else now. I've got enough value out of this process that I want to change. Again, in our traditional process, if we're halfway through development and we run out of money, we've got 2 choices. We can walk away with nothing, or we can feed more money in until the testing's finished. Or we can't actually stop halfway through and say, I don't want to spend any more money on this. I want to get some value out of what you've already done. So agile processes give us this opportunity to realise value early in the build cycle. And Scrum is just one of that family of agile processes. So how do I actually give control back to my customer on when they want to realise value of the software that they're paying for? So product owners need to be people, not committees. Often organisations try and either proxy the role, in other words, they put someone else in who doesn't really have that authority, like a business analyst, because the real product owner is too busy, has to focus on other things. That's not a recipe for success. Or they try and manage by committee. So, well, this thing is so important, there's 4 people who will be product owner. But again, you haven't got a single decision maker at that point. So that's not going to work well either. Okay, a development team. So they're building this product increment. They do this via a series of sprints. So these are these time boxes, 2 weeks. They do this in 2-week cycles. They are self-organizing. So the idea behind self-organizing is the team are given a problem to solve, and that problem is, here is the next set of requirements I want you to build in 2 weeks, and they work out a way to do it. So there is no manager in the middle saying, you're going to do this task, this task, this task, this task. So the idea is the team are actually the best people to figure that out. And obviously they're collaborating with the product owner. So you go back to the heart of any agile process. They all came from the same place. Scrum, Kanban, feature-driven development, behavior-driven development, any you like. They all came from the Agile Manifesto, which had 8 kind of key rules in it. And one of those was teams value collaboration and communication over documentation. So it's more efficient actually to get people in a room and talk about it than write documents and click those documents between people. So they all are about collaboration, close customer collaboration. You know, XP, extreme programming, is exactly the same. How do you bring your customer into your development effort? So the development team is more than just software developers or coders, right? We need everyone on our team that can is part of the process of taking a requirement from started through to finished to production quality. So people often think, I can't use Scrum because I don't have people who can do everything. I don't have these magical cross-functional teams. Magical cross-functional individuals. You know, I have specialists, and those specialists can only do one thing, and no one else can do that thing. Actually, that's fine. As long as you have a team of people with all the skills in it that you need, Scrum is going to work for you. So the reality is we have specialists in our teams. So certain people only know certain languages. Testers can't necessarily write code, and user interaction designers are highly skilled in a specific specialism, and no one else can do that. That's fine as long as you have all those skills in the team. So again, the team can take the requirement with all the skills in it, figure out how to turn that into a finished increment. So it's not a question of one person can do everything, but this team needs to consist of all the skills it needs. And we talk about done. So you see here it talks about a done increment. Scrum has this first-class concept of a definition of done, which means be explicit about what finished looks like. So again, often as developers, so I'm a developer myself, done for us is the coding's finished, right? That was the good bit. Less interesting now. It's with the tester guide, whatever, it's all downstream. Someone is going to make me do some documentation of that at some point, but I'm going to try and hide from that as much as I can and get on to some more exciting coding. Scrum is about, well, we need to keep all of that stuff happening in sync so that when we go back to our customer and say this is finished, we can say what finished looks like. Finished includes all the testing, no bugs, documentation's up to date, the release plan is up to date, all of the automated release MSIs are built, and whatever it is that you need to do to ship that thing, it's all and that's got every single feature. So you're constantly updating the document rather than waiting to the end and writing those massive documents that everyone hates. You're constantly updating it on a feature by feature level. The teams have this kind of checkbox definition of done. Tick, tick, tick. Okay, we've done them all for this feature. We're good to go. Okay, so our final role is our Scrum Master. So again, they're really here to make sure that Scrum is being followed. That the team is being, if they say they're doing Scrum, they're being true to what Scrum is. So they're helping the team improve and getting rid of the day-to-day issues that crop up. So how do we get a new build machine? Well, the Scrum Master is hopefully going to take that on to the team and escalate it through management and make it happen. And whatever impediments come up, they're there to help get rid of them. So servant lead is often a term that is used to describe Scrum Master. So they're servant to the team, but they're showing leadership. So it's this idea of they're there to serve the team, but they're basically there to get things out of the team's way so that they can do what they're good at. And they can't be the product owner. So there's this direct conflict of interest between, on the customer, I want more, and the Scrum Master is kind of there to serve and protect the team. Those two roles can't be filled by the same person. Okay, let's move on to artifacts. So I have 3 artifacts. Product backlog, sprint backlog, and our increment of working software. People refer to the product backlog as this idea of desirement. They're not even requirements at this point, right? It's something someone wants the software to do, but it doesn't do it yet. Whereas a requirement is something the software has to do in order to pass a test. Right, so it's just something I want it to do. It's not defined, it doesn't have to do it. It's potential features. So just because it's on this list doesn't mean it's going to get done. Product owner can decide, I'm going to move that right down to the bottom of the list. We may never get there. The project or the product may move on to something else before that one's ever addressed. Again, traditionally we would analyse and design every single thing on the requirements list, even though it might not be particularly high value. So it's a single source of truth that is publicly available, so the whole team can see what's on it. And anyone can put a new item on it, but only the product owner can afford it, right? So they're about that, they're not investing. So a product backlog item has what I want it to do and what it looks like when it's finished. So this idea of acceptance criteria. What are the details behind it? And this gets fleshed out as it gets higher up the list and closer for the team to actually take on. So there may be other things attached to it. It may have spec, it may have screen mock-up, architecture models, whatever you need in order to actually deliver it. But again, these things get added as it comes up the list, not when it's added to the list. So as it reaches the level of priority that someone might actually develop it, then we start fleshing out the detail. So just in time, this lean approach of just in time requirements, as it's becoming more important, let's spend some time doing the analysis and design on it. So let's not do the analysis and design on the low value features. So some examples of things that might be on the product backlog. Bugs go on the product backlog. They're just requests for more work. They get ranked alongside everything else. Okay, our sprint backlog. This is owned by our development team. Remember, this is how we're going to deliver it. So we take the top so many items off the product backlog. So this is what we select for a sprint. Maybe we say we're going to do the top 5 in the next 2 weeks. And then we come up with a plan for delivering that top 5. Typically that's breaking the features down into tasks. So now we're talking about, we're going to code. We're going to build some new web pages, we're going to build the controllers, the branching infrastructure, the database tables, the ORM technology, whatever it is that the nitty-gritty of building it, we stop putting those down into tasks and we individually estimate all of those tasks. We've got to update our release documentation, we've got to write the unit tests, we've got to test it. You know, all of those things go into the sprint backlog. So here's an example of that. We take the top 3 here, break those down into tasks. And then we've got this really detailed plan that we can use for the next 2 weeks. So at a task level, we can basically check things off and say, this is done, I'm moving on to this next one. This is harder than I thought, it's taking longer. So we can track progress at a really fine-grained level in these 2-week increments. So they end up as small, these tasks. If you have a task that is 25 hours, I need to code widget X, Y, and Z, widget X, Y, Z. If you're 50% out, which, let's be honest with ourselves, we normally are on estimation, now all of a sudden that's now 50 hours. So that's over a week's worth of work for one single task. So while it's tempting to just have 2 or 3 tasks in total and put 20 hours, 15 hours, we're trying to break these down into really, really small units. So by that I mean 6 hours or less. We tend to use 6 hours for a day. It just works in terms of estimation. And so if you think about breaking up building software into 6-hour tasks, that's quite small, that's quite detailed. It makes you think about all the things you're going to have to do in order to ship something, if you're forced to break it down into these small units. Here's an example. So let's start, we've got our fetch 1 day's temperature data from the weather provider system, which is our feature request. So this is our product backlog item. We've broken that down into connectivity, authentication, reading the data and parsing the temperature out of the data, and putting hours remaining on each of those things. So you get the idea, and testing would be on there, and documentation would be on there, breaking it down into these really small chunks. So our increment, potentially shippable, and this means it's done. So again, this idea of a definition of done, explicit about what done means. So if you have a conversation with your customer and they say, "How's this picture?" You go, "It's done." They go, "You know what, that's fantastic, let's ship it." If you have to turn around and say, "It's got to be tested yet," that's another 2 weeks. Right? You're losing trust very quickly. There's no trust relationship between you and the customer. The next time you say it's done, they'll be, "Well, what does that mean? How much more work, how much more money have I got to pay you before I can actually have it?" So it's being really explicit about done, what done means. The customer understands and knows, and the whole team understands and knows. And the idea is done is as close to production as you can possibly get it. User acceptance tested, right? Maybe it's on a staging area ready to ship when you're ready. Maybe it's signed off by test. Whatever you can get it, as close to production as you can get it, then you're lowering the cost when the customer says, "I want to ship it." You don't have this stabilization kind of bubble at the end of the process. So teams now are moving to continuous delivery. This idea that on demand, the customer can pull this finished software into production for effectively zero cost, because it's all automated at that point. It's stacked and ready to go. Okay. Events. So inside our sprint, inside our 2 weeks, we have sprint planning, this daily stand-up, sprint review, and retrospective. So for a 2-week sprint, there's about a day and a half there in meetings. So now our 10 days, our 2-week sprint stands at 8.5 days. So if you start to think about what can we as a team build to production quality in 8.5 days, it's not a lot. In fact, about half the size you think you can. When you actually start doing this, and you take this stuff on for the first 8.5 days, you'll miss by a mile. Because you'll think you can do this much, and you might deliver this much. Because as soon as you start doing all the testing, all the documentation, all the process in your organization that you need to get it ready to ship, you'll find you can deliver only a tiny amount of software in 8.5 days. And so this forces this prioritization idea of what is the most valuable thing to the customer, how can we efficiently break it down in order to deliver it in these small chunks. So our sprint planning, we took the highest value features and we're breaking them down into tasks. That's what's happening in this meeting. And the whole Scrum team is there. So there's not a tech lead or architect that gets to estimate everything and break it down. This is a whole team event. And then we have our sprint. So this is our 2 weeks, a 2-week time box. 30 days or less. So 30 days or less is what Scrum says. The reality is every team is doing 2 weeks. It's really unusual to find teams doing larger than 2 weeks. And I really wouldn't recommend 30 days because it doesn't force you to change your engineering process. 2 weeks will force you to change the way you do engineering. So our daily Scrum. Pretty much lots of teams, if they take anything from an agile process, this is the thing they take. So every day, stand-up meeting, 15 minutes or less, the whole kind of team comes together on whether so synchronize, ask for help, report progress, that all happens in this meeting. And lots of teams, even that aren't doing Scrum, end up with some kind of Scrum board, just because visualizing work is a really powerful technique. So a typical Scrum board will look like this, features or product backlog items on the left, and then hopefully only 3 columns to do, in progress, done. So there's no ready for testing, there's no in testing here. So we're trying to get the whole team to come together and take an item from left to right. What we're not doing is segregating roles. So testing columns just basically reinforce the idea of I'm going to throw it to you when I'm finished with it, and I'll throw it back when it's tested. So we're trying to get people to work together. And so in progress, it really doesn't matter whether it's coded or tested, it's not done. And all that matters is it's done. Like everything else is immaterial. Customer doesn't care about work that isn't done. Next. So our sprint review. We get to show the customer and stakeholders what was built in 2 weeks. And all that gets shown in this meeting is work that is done. So going back to that board, if anything doesn't make it, it's still in progress. You know, there was only one little test case left to do, doesn't get shown in the sprint review. We're trying to build this trust that when we show you it, that means it's done. And when we say it's done, that means you can ship it. You could say, okay, I'm ready, and there's very little work to actually push that into production. So even if there's only a tiny bit of work left before it's done, it doesn't get demoed in the sprint review. Okay, finally the retrospective. So again, a continuous improvement meeting. How do we improve our engineering, our communication, collaboration, our development process? So constantly refining the idea of inspect and adapt, the kind of the Scrum keywords. How do we refine our process to get better? So those are our meetings. Okay, that was a whistle-stop kind of Scrum in half an hour. There's obviously a lot more to show you, but I wanted to give you a really, really brief overview before I showed you how we implemented it for an insurance company in New Zealand, alongside Team Foundation. Okay, so the company is called IAG. It's New Zealand's largest general insurer. So everything but health insurance, basically. You insure your car or your house, or commercial insurance for work premises, all done out of this insurance. It had 2 main brands, one for insurance brokers and one for direct to public. And about $1 billion gross premium, so $1 billion worth of cover. And that was made up of those 2 large brands as well as a number of unique targeted segment brands, if you like. So the idea, if you've got a Ferrari or a classic car and you want car insurance, general insurance companies normally wouldn't touch you because it's too high risk and it's too specialist. So those other organisations, those other brands dealt with some of these specific targeted insurance. So they'd insure boy racers, that's what they call them in New Zealand. They have that term here, boy racer. Young people with really fast cars, performance cars, that kind of thing. They, you know, someone who's 18 and they've got a 50,000 pound car, that kind of thing, they would insure that. They had 3 major systems, so 3 policy administration systems. So if you think of an old insurance company or a banking company, there's lots of legacy technologies around, and they tend to run off 1960s era administration systems. They were no different. And 120 systems around the edges, so kind of satellite systems, if you like. 1 in Australia. They did their own development and outsourced their infrastructure. So their servers and network were all outsourced and looked after by third-party companies, but they had their own analysts, developers, and testers. And there's about 150 made up of analysts, developers, and testers. That's kind of their scale. So we introduced Scrum in May 2009, was when we started with our proof of concept. And we quickly sent their 150 on Scrum training. So over the months after that, the 150 went through some variety of Scrum training. As new projects started getting approved, so existing projects were left alone, new projects that started were basically put together using Scrum. So we formed a Scrum team around the resources that were available at the time, put aside an area for those Scrum boards where people could have their stand-up meetings, and then for those people that needed it, we ran an advanced Scrum training for those Scrum Masters. So probably the most important thing is, why did they do it? Lots of people say, we want to use Scrum. I go into companies and they go, we want to do Scrum, or Kanban, or you name it. But why? Well, we've heard it's a good thing, and our competitors are doing it, and we want some of this agile. We want to be agile. Okay, why? And often there's no real problem that the organisation is trying to solve. This type of approach means a lot of change for your company. So unless you've got a problem that you're trying to solve, I wouldn't recommend it. So we were pretty explicit and said, what do you actually want to achieve? And they felt that there was this lag between starting a project, they had a lot of 12-month plus pieces of work, and actually realising any value. And they'd actually just gone through a big failed project that lost a lot of money, and they didn't want that to happen again. So like $20 million thrown away, kill it, and so they said, that's never going to happen again. We want to change to get short-term delivery even over our long projects. And the business wanted to be able to prioritise at a lower level than just a project. So rather than prioritising 25 projects, they wanted to actually go down to the feature level. So you won't be able to read that, but the point of this slide is we had a plan. We started with proof of concepts, we had success criteria outlined before we started, so we could measure the success of each phase before we'd start onto the next phase of the Scrum rollout. So rather than just go all in, there were a bunch of measurements to say, are we being successful? So, what did we actually get? Well, it felt like we'd invited our mother-in-law to come and live with us. Now, I love my mother-in-law, but I wouldn't particularly want her to live with me. So this idea that your mother-in-law will constantly remind you that their daughter or son could really have married someone just a little bit better than you, and they're going to make sure that you know that. And yet, Scrum really achieves this by constantly pointing out the failures in your development process. If there's something not right, because you're working to these really, really tight 2-week cycles, and you're breaking these things down into tasks, if anything is delaying your team, it's going to have this accelerated impact. So you're going to see everything that's wrong. And if you choose to do nothing about it, nothing will get better. Scrum will highlight those things that are wrong. The organisations that are successful with Scrum fix those things. Other organisations change Scrum so that those things go away. So for example, if your customer isn't engaged in your project, doesn't come to any of the meetings, Scrum will show you this. You'll go through your retrospective process, we can't speak to our product owner, we don't know what the next highest priority is. Some organisations will stop the project unless the product owner engages. Other organisations will go, let's put our tech lead as the product owner. Well, that solved nothing. We just made the problem go away by changing the rules of Scrum. You've got a choice. Scrum will show you something's wrong, fix it, change Scrum. And lots and lots of companies choose to change Scrum because they're not easy things to fix. So things we came up against. And these are in every single company. So I've done this for getting on for 10 years now, and the same issues always come up. No, it won't possibly work here because we're special. My technology is special, my company culture is special, my particular workforce, the way we do projects, the way our building is laid out, They're the same things. The tooling, so we've used Scrum on teams that write assembler, on mainframes, right through to obviously today's technology. The technology really doesn't matter. And we've had teams of guys with 30 or 40 years experience in the industry next to graduates. So it's not a question of the age of your workforce either. This is about change. People don't like change. We as an industry inflict change on others. We actually don't like change inflicted on us. So when you go in and shake up someone's process, say, actually we're going to change things around, people get defensive about that. So they need to understand why. Why are we changing? What's going to be the benefit for the organisation? So if we fast forward to today, what has changed for them? Blurring the lines of the roles is really one of the key ones. This idea that I'm not primarily now a tester or a coder or an architect. I'm one of a team. And that team is really only about getting value out to the customer. So if I was a great developer, I'm fantastic at putting out code, and yet my team is not producing good value to my customer, I'm not being very effective for my organisation. Actually, all that we do is team-based now. And this idea that I'm a fantastic tester, but if the software coming out is no good because my developers are no good, the fact that I'm fantastic really isn't helping you. So it really changed the way people looked at themselves inside those teams to be more about how do we make sure the customer gets the maximum value we can as a team, from it's all about me and how I do my job to how can I help you because I can see your stroke. So it's just a shift in terms of self-identity really of people in these teams. And with that comes accountability. It's being really clear every 2 weeks there's a deadline. Someone's going to be sat in a room going, great, show me what you've built. If you've got nothing to show or you've got not a lot to show, it's not a great feeling. So the team learned quickly from those occasions so that they never really happen again. So each individual discipline went through quite a lot of change, and I went through the analysts, developers, testers, and just asked them, what for you were some of the biggest changes you found? For people who were primarily business analysts, it was this kind of list. Previously, they'd sort of defined themselves as custodians of the requirements. They were people who bridged the business and the technical people in the organisation, and so they had a lot of store in there as their value to the organisation. Once we brought the customer into the team, that disappeared. Well, we actually don't need an interpreter anymore because the customer's right here. So it was redefining what their value was. Our developers weren't used to working with testers, weren't used to having someone on their shoulder going, how am I going to test this? Watching what they were doing constantly, questioning what they were doing constantly. We brought in a lot of code review process, test-driven development, big changes for the developers. Thinking about things like design patterns, new tooling, thinking about engineering. So more than just how am I going to build this widget, was what's going to be the whole of life cost of this widget? How are you going to build maintainability in? How are you going to build quality in from day one? So it was a real shift for the devs. This is a challenging world for manual testers. So by that I mean people who test for a living that are really non-technical. They are going to find this kind of change challenging because you cannot keep retesting in these 2-week cycles. The regression testing gets so big so quickly that you need to automate the testing. And so testers who are more technical in nature are going to be able to cope with that a lot easier than people who have never really had to see any code or deal with any code. And it also places more weight on the developers. The developers have to help with automation frameworks, with thinking about how the code they're writing can be automated from a testing point of view. Similarly with architecture, they were very used to giving something a rubber stamp up front. This is is it, we're going to stick to this blueprint, go away and make sure it stays in here, but of course the requirements are shifting as the project moves along. So that blueprint up front was really out of date quickly. So architects had to stay engaged for the whole length of the project instead of just at the front and then move on to the next one. So it was a big change for them too. So some of the tools we used for automated tests, MS test for API, automated acceptance testing tools like open source tools like Fitness, Selenium, Coded UI through Visual Studio. Effectively, you can't keep up with that automation. So some other things we brought in around Scrum. How do we actually get people thinking about learning? Part of that was we sort of brought in these three things. Coding dojos were the first one. So we got the developers together, basically anyone who was interested. We're going to run these dojos every week. We'll have a coding challenge, some kind of problem we're going to solve. Everyone who's in the room has to code. And so the first time we ran one of these, we had a load of managers show up. We had the development manager and the engineering manager and head of product development, as well as all the developers. And I put these rules up. Said if you're in the room, then you're coding, no exceptions, including me. And all the managers kind of silently left the room, right? Because they hadn't touched the keyboard in years. So all the developers were left. And this is how they learn things like test-driven development, behavior-driven development. They learn it together by peering. It's how they learn about pair programming. So once you took them out of a deadline situation, said, well, we're just doing this, we'd do it over lunchtime, hour and a half over lunchtime, get one of the managers to buy lunch, and they would pair. So that no one in that team, actually no one in that organisation had ever gone through pair programming before. So it was a really good way for them to learn. Switch the pair every 10 minutes, so the co-pilot, the pilot, so on. And then people ask design comments when it's green, so they were going through the strict red-green refactor kind of test-driven development cycle. With the opportunity for anyone in the room to go, why are you doing that way, not this way? And actually, we're quite bad at learning from each other as developers. Whether it's, well, I don't really want you to see me coding because you might be better than me, or you might, I don't really want to share, it's kind of a private thing. Once you actually share it out, people can learn from the different, everyone's good in certain areas, right? People can learn from the tricks of others. Accelerates everyone's learning really, really quickly. Why did you use a class there, not an interface? Have you thought about this design pattern? It really helped people come on and learn from a lot of the seniors. Excuse me. So what else did we do? Well, here's an example of one of the problems we introduced, this series of one around gaming. So there were lots of gamers in the development community there. So we built a character management system for a game. Now, how would we go through and build the weapons, strikes, what weapons would you use, and so on and so on. So we had stories, acceptance criteria, just like you get on a project. So the other thing we did was a conference. We basically got agreement for half a day. We started with half a day and then moved to a day from the management, where all of the developers would come and present to each other on something that interested them. It didn't matter if the company used that technology or not, but everyone would do a half an hour slot. And these are the kind of sessions that came up. So things like Windows Mobile, things like Android, were of no direct value to the organisation, but again, it's about stimulating a learning culture inside your company. So people who are passionate about Android at home, and a little coding project, would come in and do a slot on that for the rest of the team, who would get that information. Actually, it doesn't matter what you're learning, as long as you're learning. Right? It just engages people in learning something new. We put them all through this professional Scrum developer training. So this is a Scrum course that's about how do you use Visual Studio for agile engineering. How do you get across the changes in your engineering process that you're going to need in order to build short iteration products. Professional Scrum Master training. So this was one of the key measures we put in. This was a survey, part of a 6-question survey that we've run every quarter since Scrum started. And the key question that this is showing is, if the decision was solely up to you, would your team continue to use Scrum? And hopefully you can guess that the big piece of the pie is yes, otherwise I wouldn't be standing here talking to you about it. So if people aren't enjoying it, something's wrong. You know, this should be an exciting way to work. It shouldn't be a punishing way to work. So one of the key metrics for me is, are people enjoying it? Would they want to go back to what they were doing previously? So we had some impact on the workplace, and I've got some pictures rather than talking about it. So here's some of the boards. So Team Foundation, Server, Sprint Burn Down Query. You can see that area on the top left. That's kind of an area that was set aside for stand-up meetings. You can see some of the boards there, as well as kind of breakout areas for the team to just have detailed conversations about some technology problems. Some more boards. And they all folded up, so we can get lots and lots of boards and use both sides of them. That's a mobile conferencing unit. So we had people in different offices, and rather than everyone sat at their desk Skyping in or something like that, we could basically get everyone having a stand-up meeting, including the people off-site, because we could wheel this unit into where the stand-up's happening. So that, I can't remember how much it was, a couple of $1,000, well worth the investment. Because you're kind of part of this ring of people that felt like you were there in the team. Some people having a planning meeting. See, young, engaged workforce, all straight out of school. So open plan is great. You know, these were all Scrum teams, basically in these units facing each other. We're all Scrum teams. No cubicles. Team structure changed. So they flipped from the project was the centre of the world, and they drew people to a project, to the team is the centre of the world, and we'll take projects into teams. So they ended up with these teams that stayed together, that would just take the next project off the queue. It was a huge change to the way they did project resourcing. Okay, let's talk some tools. So they started with SVN, Jira, and Greenhopper, and Hudson, and moved to Team Foundation Server 2010. So they used TFS for all those things there. Everything but lab management, because they use VMware for virtualization. So how did we do it? We basically took entire teams at once. Rather than do all the testers or all the source code, we took a whole Scrum team and moved them onto TFS tooling. So they got all of those things at once. Otherwise, it's kind of a massive process to turn all the testers, train all the testers, developers, analysts in the tooling. We could just train a whole Scrum team at once. And tooling's pretty emotional. You know, you get people that love Git or Jira or whatever it is, and it can get quite emotional trying to change them onto something else. And there's always arguments about which is best. So Team Foundation Server is pretty effective as a team-based solution. I think it stands against pretty much everything else out there. Either better source control systems, for sure. Better test case management, yep. But a better end-to-end for all the teams, I don't think so. So I'll just show you, I've got some examples out of those teams of what they were getting out of Team Foundation Server. This is what I mean by the best for the team. So as an integrated platform, here's some of the sprint burn down. So you can see we've got hours completed and remaining over the sprint. So this is a build report. And what I'm trying to show here is the integrated nature of the build. So we go through this build, and you see those blue arrows up on the right-hand side. I'm just going to walk down those. So we've run this build. This is a continuous integration build, so triggered off a check-in. So we've run our tests. You can see there 78 tests of 78 tests have passed. So we've run our unit tests off the CI build. The next one binary was instrumented, 99% of all code blocks covered. So we got code coverage as well. So again, single build, unit tests, code coverage. Next one, associated change sets. So we're going to link there to the source code files that are in that have been changed that kicked off that build. So we've got traceability back to, well, what was the code that caused this to get compiled. Next one down is the associated work item. So why was this build done? So someone has checked in and associated this change with a work item. So I'll fix this bug, or I have finished this feature. And then finally we've got impacted tests. So which tests have been impacted by that change? It's hugely powerful getting that integrated view off the build. You can do most of that with open source, but it'll take you some time to get all that stuff wired up, and it won't be pretty. So this integrated nature of everything is hanging off the build, and I can see all the dimensions, right? I can see everything from, if I'm a tester, I can come in and go, what test cases are impacted, what should I be running, what features are in there for me to test, and what code has changed that went in there. So no more readme.txt files, right, to say what's in this build and someone forgets to put stuff in there. It's all done by you via the tooling. This is a great one-page quality view. So there's a lot going on this report. Let's start with the green bars. So the green bars show me the number of tests that have been run, and if they're green, then they all pass. If some of them have failed, it'd be like a red slice at the top showing a number of how many failed. So then across the top in black, that's the code coverage percent that was achieved in that build. So each green bar represents a build. So my first build had 196 tests and 84% code coverage. So the next line, the blue is the active bug count. How many bugs are active in that build? So now I'm seeing, did the test pass? How many were there? What was the code coverage? How many bugs? The red line is the code churn. How many lines of code were added, removed, or changed? So this is hugely valuable. Again, I've got this multi-dimensional view of builds over time. So for example, if we're coming to the end of a milestone and lots of code is changing, I might start asking questions. Why is so much code changing when we're coming down to the end or stabilization? And if it is, and maybe that means the code coverage is dropping, well, are we not writing more unit tests as we're writing code to put pressures on? So we can really see that the quality is being maintained by this report. Again, trying to get that level of view in any other tooling, incredibly difficult. In fact, that one I think is probably impossible. Yeah, Kristen. The black line, that's the code coverage percent. So those 100, the green bar on the very right, 197 tests is achieving 84% code coverage. Yeah.
รู้จักโค้ดคอเวอเรจใช่ไหมครับโค้ดคอเวอเรจรู้จักใช่ไหมครับโอเคอันนี้เป็น quality index report right
Sorry?
quality index report right
What's the name of that report?
Yes.
That's the build quality report.
yes อันนี้เป็น build quality build quality index report นะฮะที่ generate โดย team Python server สีเขียวแต่ละแท่งเนี่ยคือ build ที่เกิดขึ้นก็หมายความว่าเราสั่งให้มัน build compile ทั้งโปรเจกต์หรือ check in ข้างล่างนี่จะเห็นว่าเป็น document CI ก็คือ continuous integration นะครับ check in เข้าไปมี build number วันที่เท่าไหร่ตัวเลข series ที่เท่าไหร่เราทำ unit test ไปบน source code ที่อยู่ใน source control ตัวนี้คือ check in เข้า source control ด้วยถูกไหมครับมีการ run unit test ก็ไอตัว build automation นี้จะ run unit test ให้พอเราสั่ง run unit test นะครับเราจะเห็นตัวนี้มีก่อนหน้านี้จะมีเรื่องของ test impact หรือ unit test ที่ต้อง run บนโค้ดที่เปลี่ยนแปลงเส้นสีแดงเนี่ยคือโค้ดเชิญคือโค้ดที่มีการเปลี่ยนแปลงนะฮะแล้วพอมีการเปลี่ยนแปลงโค้ดก็หมายความว่าตัว unit test ก็มีมารีรันพอ run unit test นะครับโค้ด coverage statistic เนี่ยมันจะเป็นตัวบอกว่า unit test ที่รันไปบน source code ผ่านไหนรันบน source code ตัวไหนมันก็จะคำนวณมาให้ว่า unit test ทั้งหมดที่รัน ผ่านซอร์สโค้ดจำนวนกี่เปอร์เซ็นต์นะหรือกี่บล็อกของมันนะครับอันนี้ก็คืออยู่เอาแถวๆ80 กว่าเปอร์เซ็นต์ขึ้นไปนะส่วนมากมันจะไม่มีทางให้เป็น100นะเพราะบางส่วนโค้ดจะไม่ถูกเทสนะครับนะแต่ว่าเราจะเห็นว่าตอนนี้มันถูกเทสไปกี่เปอร์เซ็นต์นะครับมีคำถามตรงไหนอีกไหมครับตอนนี้นะครับ
รู้ว่ากี่เปอร์เซ็นต์นี่คือกี่เปอร์เซ็นต์จาก
กี่เปอร์เซ็นต์ของโค้ดทั้งหมด
ถ้าบางส่วนเราไม่ได้เขียนเทสไว้ไอ้ส่วนนั้นจะเป็น
ศูนย์
แล้วเราไปทำว่าส่วน
คือสมมติว่าเรามีถ้าเป็นคลาสเนี่ยในไฟล์ customer class.cs มี5 method นะครับทั้งไฟล์เนี่ยคือ 100% ถูกไหมฮะเรามี5 method 5 method นี้เนี่ยโค้ดที่มัน walk ไปเนี่ยกี่เปอร์เซ็นต์นะ5 method สมมติ method ละ20ถูกไหมมันจะไม่เท่ากันนะแต่ว่าถ้าเรามีการ unit test cover ไปที่ method เหล่านั้นมันก็โดนไป 20% 20% 20% อีก2เมธอดไม่ได้เขียนเทสไว้ไอ้ตรงนี้ก็จะประมาณ 60% เพราะฉะนั้นโค้ดของไฟล์นี้โค้ดโคเรตของไฟล์นี้คลาสนี้คือ 60% แต่ถ้าเกิดทั้งโซลูชันทั้งโซลูชันอาจจะ coverage รวมทั้งหมดเฉลี่ยเป็น 70% ตัวนี้คือเฉลี่ยทั้งบิลทั้งโปรเจกต์ทั้งโซลูชันว่าไปนะฮะโอเคโอเค
So this is a screenshot of Microsoft Test Manager, which is a new tool that's shipped with Visual Studio 2010 for testers. So this is really the testers tool for Team Foundation Server. So where they run test cases from, where they manage test cases. And I just wanted to show you this to see if you could get a flavour for the proportion of automation that these teams were using. So you can see of the 20 or so test cases there, 17-ish are automated. So there's really, really heavy focus on automation. Very, very few manual tests. This is another report out of Team Foundation Server. This is called the Stories Overview. And again, on one page, we start over on the left-hand side. Those are our user stories or requirements. Going to those green bars on the right is how finished are they? How much work is left on each of those? So it's a roll-up of all the tasks, all of the hours that are left on those tasks. And then moving across to the right, those bars you can see with red and green in, those are the test results. So what proportion of tests are passing, what proportion are failing, the red ones, and how many haven't been run, which is the grey or black that you can see there. And finally, how many open bugs for each requirement. So from day one of the sprint, so every day over those 2 weeks, we would be running this report to see the progress of, for the 5 features we took into the sprint, how many are finished, how many bugs, how many test cases have been built, are they passing, really, really valuable real-time information back for the stakeholders. Again, no one had to go to the team and say, so how's it going? Are you nearly finished? What's the progress? Between the quality report, this report, you're getting all the data you could possibly need. So this is a tool called Fitness. I just wanted to show you this because there are things that TFS and Visual Studio don't do. If you want to be, if you want to get into executable specifications or acceptance, test-driven development, this idea of I agree a specification with my customer and I now want to automate it. So this is an acceptance test level. Tools like Fitness are really, really good for that, where I can put in this table-driven scenario. So given these inputs, this is the output I want to see. I can write this before the code, and I can automate it off the build. So we all integrated this into Team Foundation Server so we could consolidate all the reporting. But Fitness was driving the automated acceptance testing. So there's a close-up testing email fixture. So fixture is a Fitness word, testing email formats. And that's just showing those Fitness results in Microsoft Test Manager. So again, integrating the two platforms. So I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but a few things that relate to Agile and in particular in Dev 11 or Visual Studio 2012 as it's now called. One of the main things I want to call out is the investment from Microsoft in Scrum. So the biggest indicator really for me is the new process template. So myself and a bunch of the other Scrum trainers had a lot of input into that Microsoft Scrum version 2 process template, which comes with Visual Studio 2012. It's also in the TFS preview in the cloud. But this is the key thing. They've made this the new default template. So you kind of might think, well, so what? Well, the vast majority of customers, when they create a new team project in Team Foundation Server, just go next, next, next. And now they're going to get a Scrum project when they do that. So it's a huge shift from Microsoft basically saying, we see Agile as the way forward for software development, and actually within that we see Scrum as the way forward. And they've made that the default process template. So it's just huge investment in Scrum from Microsoft. And you can see that with the task board. So they didn't have a Scrum board in 2010. That was filled by some partner products. 2012, they've built their own. So here's a screenshot. I can drag and drop. I've got a sprint burn down chart in the top right here to give real-time progress information. So again, really investing in Agile development. You know, they very much see that as this is what organisations are currently doing, and if they're not doing it, they're going to be doing it soon. If you're using any one of the other process templates, no investment in it. CMMI, got hardly anything. The Agile, MSF for Agile, hardly anything. All of the investment went into the Agile development and in particular Scrum. So storyboarding. Has anyone used a tool called Balsamiq? No? Okay. So the lightweight mock-up tools to build screenshots and application flows. So again, thinking about how we can give something to our stakeholders early to say, we kind of think it's going to look like this. And this is an example of something that's been mocked up with this storyboarding tool. Really quick to put up screen design, screen flows, give them to your stakeholder and go, is this what you want? You know, rather than investing in, they tried to do it with Blend for a while, but that was a bit of a failure. Balsamiq is a tool out there that other, it's not third party, but it's very cheap that a lot of teams have been using for years, so Microsoft want to compete with it and just bake this into the Team Foundation Server process. So it has its own work item tracking, so it becomes part of that process. I can effectively link it to source control and everything else. A big change in source control, I think I wanted to point out, because one of the main complaints against Team Foundation Server source control over the years has been it kind of feels like source safe, and I hate the fact that it's read-only on disk. It makes me do this checkout, and actually I want a Git type experience or an SVN type experience where I can do what I want and not have to check it out in read-only files. So that's now there with 2012. The new default is called local workspaces, and that basically means it's offline. So you can make changes on disk without being connected to Team Foundation Server. You don't need to check anything out. You can use any ID you want. Notepad to make a change. Team Foundation Server, when it comes back, when you reconnect, will just sort out the changes for you. So finally, they kind of got rid of that last remnant of source safe that was around. And the merge engine's been rewritten. So other things I think are worth calling out is brand new code review tooling. So first class code review built on top of the new merge and diff engine. So I can go through and see what you've done and add comments. I can request a code review or send the request to somebody else and we get a full audit trail of this. I can annotate the source code with comments. Okay, one last thing before I wrap up. I want to show you what the FBI has been up to.
รมีคำถามก็คิดไว้ยกมือได้นะครับ แต่ยังไม่จบ หาที่โน้ต
Here we go. Okay. This is the story of a big FBI project that's been in the news a lot in America recently. They had a system called the Automated Case Support, ACS, which was a CRM for criminals. So once the FBI had a case against you, you were in this database. It was built in 1970s era technology, so Adabas, green screens, IBM 3270, and lots of people thought it was obsolete before it shipped. And so the FBI decided they needed to upgrade it. So they started the Virtual Case File project, and they were going to replace ACS. They estimated it at 3 years and $380 million, so pretty big. They gave the contract to this Science Applications International Corporation with some other vendors, but they had the main contract. This is the FBI director, Robert Mueller. He had to go and get money from Congress to get this project funded and off the ground. So in 2001, coding started. Remember, 3 years, $380 million. We started coding in 2001. 2005, after he'd been back to Congress 3 times for more money, they scrapped it. 170 million, thrown away. Start again. So after that failure, he considered a new tactic. Change the project name. We'll come up with a brand new name for the same thing and it'll all be fine. Sentinel, that's a much better name. The Sentinel Case Management Project. So 2006, they gave the contract to Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin make all the fighter planes, you know, the F-14s, big defense contractor in America. This time it was going to be $450 million over 6 years. So it's got more expensive over time, and 170 million's already been wasted. This time we're going to be alright. Lockheed Martin's going to do it for us. Okay, 2010. There were 1.5 phases out of 4 finished. It spent $421 million. And the Government Oversight Committee, MITRE, estimated that in fact they needed another 6 years and another $351 million to finish it. So just mind-boggling numbers, you know. 421 million they'd spent in 4 years of the total 450 million budget, and they still reckon they needed 6 more years and another 350. So he had to go back to Congress. Amazing, this guy still got his job. So the contract was cancelled. They got a new CIO from Lehman Brothers, I think from Wall Street. And he said, well, we're going to start again. We're going to do this Scrum reset. So he started a Scrum studio in the basement of the FBI building. He cancelled the Lockheed Martin contract, and he changed the project team from 400 people to 40. So he got rid of 360 people off the project. In 1 year, with 40 people, they finished it using Scrum. And they spent 30 million. And that was the last 30 million of the budget, right? But they had 450 Lockheed Martin spent 420 of it. That was the last 30 of the budget in 1 year. The FBI tested the system with 300, the FBI did a full production test to see how the hardware would go. It lasted for 9 minutes. And the hardware that Lockheed Martin had bought in 2006 or whenever it was, blew up. So they need to buy new hardware, which is pushed the project back to 2012. They recently tested the system with 300 agents. So they bought 300 agents into the offices in Atlanta, Denver, and Newark for a crash course in how to do it, including create case files in a mock scenario. And they gave them, on a rating from 1 to 10, the users rated the system as an 8.5, which they were pretty happy with, considering, remember, they've been waiting for this thing since 2001. So if you work for the FBI, you've been waiting 11 years for this thing to be released. You'd have pretty high expectations, right? So the FBI bought 3 Exadata appliances, and they've just done a 5,000 user stress test, and Sentinel consumed only 1/10 of 1% of its processing capability. So again, it's this massive success story for Scrum. The good thing about this is it's all public information. Part of the government process in the States is that they're publicly audited, the project, the finances, so you can go to Google and check all this out. There's no vendors trying to sell anything, this is just the results of the public audit. It's a great thing to just go and see how it's been done. They talk a lot about the agile Scrum process they've used inside all the documents. But this thing has taken 12 years, and I forget how much all the money adds up to. You know, they've turned it around in 40 people in 1 year, using a completely different approach that's never been successful in the government industry at that sort of scale before. So it's a great idea. And a couple of quotes from the Inspector General's audit. So as you would expect, because he'd shrunk the project size so much, they're consuming significantly fewer dollars per month than it had when Lockheed Martin was responsible. And they've acknowledged that the modest extension to the time is due to the need to implement this refresh of the computer hardware. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you very much for listening. I know it's the last one of the day. If anyone's got any questions, happy to take them.
คำถามมีป่ะถามภาษาไทยได้ เดี๋ยวตอบภาษาอังกฤษได้ไหมเดี๋ยวครับภาษาไทยมีไหมเชิญภาษาไทยก็ได้ครับ
Did you responsible for the Sentinel project?
Sorry, say that again?
Did you responsible for Sentinel project?
Was I responsible?
Yeah.
No, I wasn't on that project.
Oh.
It's just a project that it's been very much in the news recently because it's just been audited.
มายกตัวอย่างเฉยๆครับ
อ๋อ
ว่าจะใช้ในสตูดิโอเลย
อ๋อมียกตัวอย่างให้เห็นแล้วใช่ไหมโปรเจกต์5 ปีนะเหมือนบ้านเรา5 ปีใช่ไหมแล้วก็ไปหมดไป400 ล้านใช่ไหมแล้วก็ไม่เสร็จถือว่าเสร็จเป็น1 ครึ่งก็ยกเลิกมารีเซ็ตใหม่ยังอยู่นะยังนั่งตำแหน่งนั่งอยู่กับคุมอยู่แล้วก็โปรเจกต์2นะเปลี่ยนชื่อด้วยเป็นเซนติเนลต่อไม่เสร็จหมดไป400 ล้านเลิกแล้วก็มารุ่นที่3ถูกไหมปีเดียวเสร็จหมดเลย30 ล้านก็ให้เห็นว่ายกตัวอย่างมาให้นะครับนู่นมีไหมโอเค
Thanks very much.
ขอบคุณมากครับใกล้กลับบ้านแล้วสิ่งสำคัญวันนี้นะครับรบกวนนิดนึงพอดีว่าเรายังมีงานที่ต้องทำนะครับก็คือลิงก์นะฮะบิลลี่อะไรนะ http/ นะครับ /bit.ly/vtalk 22.7 eval นะครับ ให้ทุกคนไป submit eval ออนไลน์นะครับ ต้องทำนะ ใครไม่ทำงวดหน้าไม่ให้เข้างานนะครับอะไรนะล็อกอินไม่ได้ล็อกอินทีฮะนะครับ ต้องทำนะครับต้องทำขอความร่วมมือโอเคก็ thank you ล็อกนะครับ thank you ล็อก for speaking at our event โอเคขอบคุณมากครับโอเคมีอะไรอีกไหมไม่มีแล้วมีคำถามเรื่องคราวหน้าอยากได้เรื่องอะไรกันปะ
TDD ครับ
อะไรนะ TDD Test Driven Unit Test
จากเคสจริงครับ
จากเคสจริงเราไม่มีเคสสิมีเคสของตัวเองไหม
ไม่มี
เอามาคุยกันเอาเคสจริงมายากนิดนึงนะเคสจริงมาไม่ได้ เพราะว่าไม่มีบริษัทไหนอยากจะเอาเคสจริงมาอวดไม่กล้าแต่ว่าเคสดีๆน่าสนใจแต่เมื่อเช้ามีป่ะมีลงได้ไม่ลึกแต่ก็เพราะว่าสนใจเรื่อง unit testing นะก็เดี๋ยวถ้ามีโอกาสเดี๋ยวผมจะมาขยายเรื่องนี้ให้ก็แล้วกันว่าเขาไม่ได้โฟกัส TDD แต่ว่าเรื่องของการทำ unit testing กับ build automation กับ team function server sound control อะไรพวกนี้ผมพูดได้เลยแล้วโน้ตเรื่องอื่นมี request ไหม MVC เอาเรื่องอะไร Windows ชัวร์คลาว
Windows 8
ไม่มี2 คน 3 คน Windows 8 แอปเงียบ Windows Phone แอป
Windows Phone 8
หรือว่าอะไรเอาเรื่องอะไรครับเอา VB ภาษา VB Light Switch Light Switch รู้จักนะใครไม่รู้จัก Light Switch ยกมือหน่อยเอาเรื่องหน้าไหม Light Switch เขียนโปรแกรมอย่างรวดเร็วโดยที่ไม่ต้องเขียนโค้ดเอาเปล่าไม่เขียนโปรแกรมเพื่อทำงานกับข้อมูลโดยที่ไม่ต้องเขียนโค้ดนะอาจารย์บอลเดี๋ยวฝากอาจารย์บอลนะLight Switch นะใช้วิธีดู
อาจารย์บอลครับ
คุณนาโนวันนี้นาโนไม่มาLight Switch เงี้ยข่าวอะไรนะให้ผมเทพตรวจสอบทีโอให้
ตอนนี้เราติดภารกิจเลี้ยงลูก
โอเคขอบคุณทุกคนมากครับเดี๋ยวเชิญถ่ายรูปด้านหน้านะฮะใครยังไม่รีบกลับบ้านนะครับบัตรแอคเซสนะครับอย่าทำหายนะแล้วก็บัตรจอดรถตามด้วยนะครับที่เคาน์เตอร์นะฮะจะได้ไม่ต้องเสียค่าใช้จ่ายนะครับรบกวนมีขยะติดไม้ติดมือนะครับหยิบออกไปทิ้งให้ด้วยนะครับแล้วก็ไปถ่ายรูปภาพหมูข้างหน้าเลยนะฮะเดี๋ยว
นี่
ข้างหน้าหน้าห้องหรือว่าข้างนอกในห้องนั่นแหละในห้องตรงนี้ฮะโอเคนะครับแล้วเดี๋ยวใครมีคำถามเนี่ยนะยังอยู่คุยกันได้อีกสักพักหนึ่งเสื้อกลุ่มคราว